Welcome, everybody. I'm going to get our special meeting started. The Ojai City Council on Redevelopment Agency, Successor Agency, special meeting, 6 p.m., June 9, 2015. Could I have roll call?
Councilmember Wyrick?
Here.
Councilmember Haney?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz?
Here.
Mayor Lara?
Here.
And Councilmember Clapp is on her way.
This is a budget workshop, and this session is to focus on city operating expenses. The goal of the workshop is to review the budget, answer questions, receive requests for additional information, and to identify potential changes for considerations when the budget is adopted. Commissions, board, and community groups funding requests will be heard during the public hearing portion of the regular agenda. And I'll turn it over to staff for the report.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Typically, we have broken the budget up into parts for purposes of review, because if you look at the budget for too long, you get cross-eyed. So, as the Mayor indicated, tonight we're focusing on the departmental operating expenses. And our plan is to go through each different operating department one at a time, review it, and then if you have questions, or if you have areas that you'd like us to look closer at, or you need additional information, we'll make note of that, and we'll bring that back for discussion when the budget's ultimately adopted. Our plan has been to try and have the workshop tonight, and a workshop at the next meeting, and a public hearing at the following meeting, and see if we're ready to adopt a budget. If we're not, we've held aside June 30th as a time for a special meeting if you need more time to go through the budget. So I'd like to start with the City Council budget, which is on pages 72 and 73. And by way of summary, this budget includes the stipend that the City Council receives, the council's benefits, and then small amounts of money for training and education, office supplies, and so forth. The total budget is $143,750. And it's been fairly consistent from year to year, covering the same types of things. So I would be open to any questions or comments about that.
Anybody have any questions?
I have one quick. There's been talk all along about the having a little further enablement of our technical support. For example, being able to call up during hearings a part of city code and putting it on that screen for the public to see when we're referencing it. Is that included in this budget?
No, that's actually being done in the current budget.
Okay, so it won't have to be part of the future budget.
Yeah, so the IT department's been working on that. I'll try and find out what the status is and let you know.
I just want to make sure we didn't need to take budget action to support that.
I also had one question, too.
Yes.
The electronic devices for us, instead of a paper trail, having some type of a miniature laptop or a iPad device that we could have actually all of this paper on it might be beneficial. So I just wanted to bring that up. I just don't know where in the budget process that belongs.
Yeah, this is actually a good place to bring that up. In the past, we did set up a system where we could put the council reports in a Dropbox, electronic Dropbox, so they could be called up on a computer or a pad. So I would say if there are council members who want to try that approach, we could put money in the budget, or we could just pull money from our existing budget to acquire either a notebook or a PC for those who are interested, and let you give it a try and see how it works.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
You know, we discussed this, didn't we, Paul? We discussed the possibility of using iPads or whatever. I think we discussed it before. And I know Rob experimented with it for a while. And I'd like to ask you what your experience was with it. And before you answer, I've been experimenting with it on some of my other commissions, having the agenda accessible that way. Mm-hmm. And personally, I find it extremely awkward. And I would love to be able to do it paperless, but for me personally, I found it just wasn't as effective. There's something about being able to flip back and forth readily and be able to take notes on your agenda that is really valuable. But, you know, I'm totally open to it if
Well-
that's something you want to do.
Well, the thing for me is, my wife does read scripts and does analytical studies for a living, and her iPad just has a simple app that comes with it. And, yeah, and you can do notes on the right side, you can highlight, you can do everything that you just talked about right there while you're on that page versus writing these, that, like, if you see my desk, I got a note over here and a note over here and a note over here. It should be great if these were more consolidated. That's all I looked at, so.
And I agree with Councilmember Clapp that we did talk about this once, and we as a whole council, we decided we still liked our paper, which I did too. But now with new technology, I've been experimenting, going through my personal work, trying out different applications, and I am intrigued, and I think that it'd be worthwhile to investigate. I do have a question for you, Rob. You said that we could either do this on the existing budget. Is there extra funds in the council budget to explore this, or are you talking about general funding or general funds?
There's a couple ways of going about it. If there's money left over in our IT budget, we could just charge it to the IT budget. So, you know, that would be if we're just buying 1 or 2 pads or whatever. We also will review later that we have proposed putting $40,000 in this year's budget for technology that improves our efficiency. And so we haven't specified yet what that money is going to be used for, but it could be used for purchasing things that make the council more efficient, of all things.
And I could see it actually benefiting the planning commission if there's special apps for them where they could view their design instead of printing all those maps, and we could save more time and money and just have it on the iPad for them. I don't know, that's also, I know that's away from this topic, but I'd be more than happy to support possibly looking into
Why
that.
don't we poll the council members and the planning commission members and see which ones want to give it a try and do some experimenting that way.
And what was your experience?
So I had the same experience as you. It was hard to move from the verbiage in the report to notes that I made, and to make new notes as I went along, and also to flip back and forth from one thing to another. So I ended up giving up on it after trying it for a few meetings.
Yeah, I remember that. And also, I think one thing that I find is that sometimes when people are so focused on a screen, I think the public feels like it's almost like you're on a cell phone in the car, that you get
Right.
sucked into this
Right.
computer and you
I can see
don't
that.
have that engagement anymore. But those are just my experiences, and I agree with Severo. I'm fine with it if you want to try it. That's fine with, I've already got an iPad, and I could, you know, if I wanted to do it, I could do it on my iPad. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm totally fine with it.
Any further questions on this item? Mayor
No,
Pro
I
Tem
think
Blatz.
that part of the problem is that sometimes you don't have the hot links to the agenda items, so you have an agenda, but then you don't have a hot link to go to take it right to the agenda item, you know, as we can do here with these tabs. So I found it to be a bit cumbersome. I can tell you at Gold Coast, there's 5 of us on the board, 2 love the iPads, and 3 of us don't use them because we don't like them, and they've got the latest technology on them, so I think that it's going to be each of us probably
Adapting our own.
adapting our own, but I'm more than willing to give it a try. I mean, I wouldn't mind that.
Any more questions for staff? No? Thank you, Rob.
Okay, the next budget is the city treasurer's budget on page 74. And this is a $2,000 budget, which primarily covers the stipend to the city treasurer and his benefits, and a small amount for professional dues.
I do have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, council member.
The proposed budget has $1,500 for salaries from $900. Could you explain that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Okay, the next budget is the city attorney budget, which is on page 75 and 76. And you'll see that in the actual for 13-14, the expenditures are broken down by various topics where legal work was done. typically what we have done is we've started the year with a budget, and then we've allocated the money to all these different projects as we go along. The main thing to pay attention here is that the budget in 13-14 was 95,000, and in 14-15 was 105,600. And this year, I'm proposing 135,000 for the budget. And that's because the amount of legal work that we have recently been seeking exceeds what has been available and used in the budget in past years, which I think is reasonable. Later on this evening, when we discuss the city attorney's contract, we do have quite a bit of discussion about cost control measures, and $135,000 will not cover the amount of legal services that we've recently been using in the last couple months. But I think that if we implement the cost containment measures that are discussed in that agenda item on the regular council agenda, with self-discipline, we can stay within the 135,000 and that it would be reasonable.
Councilmember Clapp?
Oh, yeah. What are the additional attorney's fees coming from?
So we've just asked for a lot more activity on the part of the city attorney, both in researching specific questions that come up and in dealing with some special circumstances, like, when the Neff Lounge came up, and rewriting ordinances such as the HPC ordinance, the landmarking ordinance. So I just think that the council has desired a higher level or more information than has been the case in the past.
Any other questions?
Well, I just wanted to, I don't disagree with that. I think also that in the future, I almost foresee the city attorney writing more of our ordinances versus staff. I almost see a need for that from the past experiences so far, that I think the city attorney could be more concise and more writing less to an opinion, but writing an actual ordinance that the city actually wants and that the council is dictating to. Do you guys understand what I'm saying?
When we get to that discussion, the city attorney contract's broken up into two parts. One is the retainer that covers the routine work, and the other is special projects, where we would, in the recommendation there is that before you launch a special project, you have a discussion about how much it's going to cost, and then make a decision with that knowledge at hand. So if it turns out that the special projects, which could be writing an ordinance, exceed what you have in the budget, you'd have to make a decision to budget more money to cover that expense.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Councilmember Clapp?
In the past, I recall that we've done a lot of trying to minimize attorneys' time by having staff do the research on an ordinance, do a draft, and then it always is reviewed by the city attorney in order to make sure that the ordinance meets the desires of the city council as well as law, et cetera, thereby minimizing the amount of the attorney's time so that we minimize the attorney's fees. Do you think that's an effective way to go about writing ordinances?
I do, and that's one of the recommendations in the staff report.
I have a question in terms of when we're going to be able to see how everything is broken down from the 105, 600,000 in terms of different, where the money's going?
We can provide a breakdown
provide-
as a follow-up to this meeting.
And then it would be, if it's true that in the last few or 4 months, we've been using more attorney fees, if we could highlight where it's more used or how it's being used, so we get an idea of what the difference was between last council and this new council.
I think that'll take a slightly different analysis. We're operating under the retainer. We're getting free legal services. Let me put it that way. We're operating under the retainer that was approved for Mr. Fletcher, and so we're not being billed for the excess during this current period of time. So it won't come out in our financial records, but it will come out of the billing statements. So we could break down the billing statements and do it that way.
Okay. Great.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember- Yes.
I'm sorry. Regarding that matter, the accounts payable staff actually goes through those invoices every single month, and we do try to code those to the specific areas. Even though it is going against the retainer, we have a lot of that detail that would be available for you if you'd like to
Great.
see it.
Yeah, I think it would help us make a better decision.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
to add to that point, our bills are, for the retainer work, it is broken out generally by department. And we can provide, I can work with staff to perhaps more easily access the information because the city receives the bills in a paper form. I can pull our billing software electronically and perhaps work with them to pull the data that you need.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Wyrick?
Is the money spent under contract for special legal services in the city attorney's budget, or is it elsewhere? And of course, the obvious question I have is, for 2013-14, we have a total of $272 in the wireless ordinance update. And I assume the special counsel we hired for that will be in the 14-15?
That's correct.
And is that in the city attorney? Is the outside services in this budget?
Yes,
Or
it
is it
is.
elsewhere?
It's in this
Okay.
budget.
Okay, so this is inclusive of all of that? Okay. And then the other comment I have is that in terms of the, I think with response to Councilperson's Clapp on saving money, not having the city attorney do ordinances, it's really more of a question of productivity. Because if we're spending a lot of time by staff doing something, that still is time. That is costly time in terms of getting the work of the city done. It's a matter, I think, of allocating in the way that's most productive, rather than just only trying to save money on city attorney fees. It's what's most productive overall.
Great point. Any other questions? No? With that, I'm going to...
Mr. Mayor, before we head on, I'd like to backtrack just a moment. Councilmember Clapp asked a question about the salaries for the city treasurer.
Yes.
The real issue with that is, if you look at it, the $1,500 is the actual amount that is paid to the treasurer. A portion of that was being paid by the redevelopment successor agency in the past, and that is being phased out. It's going to be, basically nothing, because the treasurer really doesn't do much for the agency right now. So that's the difference in those two numbers there. So it was $900 before, and that was the general funds portion, and the rest of his salary was being paid by the redevelopment successor agency.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we move on to section number 4?
So this is the city manager's budget, which includes the salaries for myself and my staff, as well as the benefits, office supplies, and so forth. I would like to point out a couple exceptional items. One is under payroll contingency on page 78. There's a $50,780 figure. That's set aside as money that the council can allocate to increases in salary or benefits for city employees. Secondly, a little ways below that, there's a partial OPEB pre-funding, $100,000. About a year ago, we started pre-funding retiree medical, which had not been funded in the past. And we're proposing a second pre-funding payment in order to build up that account and create some buffer in the event that bad years come along or that higher amounts are due and hard to pay. And I think,
Question. What is our unfunded liability at this point?
I don't recall off the top of my head. We could bring that back to you.
Isn't it around 5 or 6 million at this point?
I think it may be more than that, but I don't want to guess.
Yeah, the last actuarial study was done 3 years ago, and we will be actually having a new actuarial study performed this year. And in the back of my mind, I remember seeing that. I can get that information for you if you would like.
Yes,
as
please
what it was
do.
before.
Thank you.
Sure.
So the other thing I wanted to note is right at the bottom of page 79, there's a transfer to the Equipment Replacement Fund, Fund 33, of $3,330. And what you'll see this repeated throughout the budget. This is where we have budgeted a certain number of dollars per employee to go to the purchase of efficiency-enhancing equipment. So overall, the sum total is 40,000 throughout the budget, but it's broken up department by department. We feel that we're spending a lot of money to have full-time employees, and it's important to give them the tools and the programs and other things that are necessary to make them efficient.
Great.
Would education be a part of that? Or
No,
is that a different fund?
Training is budgeted, but it's budgeted in a separate part. So let me just flip back. So professional/membership dues, which is at the bottom of page 78, there's an
Right.
amount of 3,700,
Mhm.
and that covers when my staff or I attend conferences or take other trainings.
I see that number, and I see the one above it at 2,700, also training and education.
Correct.
Okay.
Both of those.
Right.
Could you remind me how many staff you have under your department?
So there's three. However, having said that, a portion of the deputy city manager's time is charged to recreation in accordance with the amount of time that he spends over there. And a small portion of the office specialist is also charged to recreation based on the Ojai Day project.
Okay, great. Any further questions?
With respect to the transfer to equipment replacement, since that's a citywide operation or a citywide effort, do you have a program of work for that developed, or you are developing it?
We will develop it. If the council approves the funding, we'll come back with the program and how it's spent. So we don't plan on spending it without first checking back with city council as to the methodology of allocating it.
Great.
So.
Sorry, one last question. So the website contract service, it's going up from 500 to 750. We've expanded our scope there. We're sure that's ample?
That's that's what we estimate based on what
We'll
we're
be
doing
okay
right
with
now.
that, because we have a pretty substantial increase in scope.
Yeah,
and access capability for the public on that.
Yeah, and so we did budget a separate item for development of the new website, which will be
In the
launched
IT
fairly
area?
soon. And I don't recall where we put it, but
Councilmember Clapp?
Yeah, I know this is kind of off topic, but speaking of internet services and website, I've noticed that our new website isn't up yet, and I was wondering if you could give a real quick update, and when do you anticipate it?
I'm going to speak on
Are
that
you?
under my
Excellent.
budget.
Okay, great, thanks.
there you go.
All right.
So this part of the website contract service, what does that cover exactly? What specific?
I
Functions
think,
of the web.
I think, but I'm not 100% sure, that it's just our allocation of the cost of the annual operating of the website.
So meaning our share,
The city manager's share. So we take the overall cost and we allocate it out to the different departments so that you get an accurate assessment of what each department costs.
great. All right, finance.
So as we go into these departments now, each of the department heads will be presenting their own budgets. And so our finance director, Rudy Livingston, will take the floor.
I guess I'll speak from here at the table here. It's been a great experience coming here and actually being part of this process here for the city. And my head spins at times, but it's been working out really well. We've got some really great people here at all levels, and so I'm really grateful for the staff that we have. For the most part, our budget in the finance area is pretty much status quo from what it was in the past. One of the areas I'm trying to beef up a little bit is our training budget. It's about the same where it was in the past, but we hadn't always utilized it. We have some needs here for getting more technical training for instance, our payroll staff person. I sent her to a training class yesterday, and I want to continue with some of that professional education so that we're totally up to total par on what we need to be doing and the best practices in the industry. So that's just one of the areas that's going to be a focus for us over the coming year. We have quite a few things that we're looking to do, and I believe that most of the initiatives we have are within our budgetary allowances here. So the biggest difference that we'll see here is actually in the budget. There's a variance in the salaries and benefits, and that is primarily due to the change between our prior director and myself, and how salary has been allocated between different department heads throughout the city, and so it's something that may or may not fluctuate, but it gives us a little bit of area to work with and provide a little bit of cushion at the end of the year if we need it, or to move to other areas as the city council may desire. But other than that, we're pretty much status quo on this. The one thing that we did also do is that you'll notice at the end of the budget, there's a new area in the budget called non-departmental. It's kind of interesting to have a non-departmental department. What we made a choice to look at some of the expenses that happen that we've been historically charging to the city council or to the city manager or to finance, and that are really citywide things such as insurance expense, insurance premiums, 4th of July celebration, things like that are really our citywide expenses. And we've tried to move several of those things out of the individual operating budgets and move them into this non-departmental, which we believe gives us a really more clear picture of what the actual operating budgets are. So that's the other big change that we've made here. And as we go through that, we'll see that a little bit later.
Makes sense.
Any questions? Councilmember Clapp?
Have you considered outsourcing payroll?
Actually, that has been suggested in the past. I specifically have not discussed that here while at the city. There are some issues that come up. It's always a topic of whether we should look at it or not. One of the major problems is that the PERS issues that we have are sometimes very difficult for the ADPs of the world or the other those companies that do that to actually because there's some nuances in there, some things that just are kind of funny. And when we've looked at it in the past with my prior government agencies with which I worked, it didn't seem to add up to us to make it really feasible. However, we are looking at outsourcing some other things where it is appropriate. We are working with a much leaner staff than what we've had in the past, and even with a less experience level as well, because we've had some higher level people. And so we're looking at ways that we can free up some more of my time so that I can do more time working with my staff and training them and mentoring them. One of the areas that we've thought about possibly outsourcing is business license, or several different things. We're looking at every single one of the processes we have right now because it doesn't make sense to add new staff at this time, because that's an ongoing cost to the city that once you're there, you keep on going with it, or you got to get rid of somebody ultimately if things don't work out. So we're looking seriously at areas where we might be able to outsource, and along the thoughts of what you're doing with payroll. I have no problems going and discussing this with outside companies that might provide the service. And if that's council's desire, we can certainly pursue that.
Are you saying that in the past you've not found a company that was familiar with the PERS process?
Yeah, most governments have in-house payroll. Most local governments that I'm aware of have in-house payroll. There are some, it's not, people know about PERS, but there are a lot of different things that go into the computations of PERS and various things that their systems aren't generally set up to handle.
But there is a possibility there is someone out there that can handle it.
Absolutely.
So
there's
maybe
a
it would be a
possibility
good
of it.
idea.
Sure,
If there's someone out there that can handle it and do a cost analysis on it.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're trying to become more efficient as we can so that we can focus on doing the things we need to do to make the
Right.
city run.
Right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Wyrick?
On the contract services TOT audit, I noticed it went from, on 2013-14, from $14,050 to nothing.
Okay.
Is that function simply not being performed anymore, or is it being performed in another way?
We don't have a plan right now to actively do TOT audits in the coming year. That's something that we look at periodically, generally, and, as you know, I wasn't here prior to now, but what happens is you go out and do TOT audits, and our staff internally actually does a little bit of auditing, and we can see where the numbers are. But once you go out and engage somebody to go do those audits for you, what you see usually is that you get the word gets out, people start, getting things people don't try to cheat generally. They try to do things right, but things get messed up or whatever. But they pay extra attention to things when you're doing the audits. And what I found in my prior history is that once you go through one of those audits, for about 2 or 3 years thereafter, you generally don't have many issues out there. So
Suggesting the most efficient way to do that auditing is about every 3 years then?
yeah, generally. It sometimes, some areas, cities I've gone through, we've actually rotated. We'll do a third of it one year, a third of it next year, a third of it the following year, or so forth. So it's a possibility. Generally, I mean, we don't want to. Our real goal with TOT is that people are complying and paying what they should be paying on an ongoing basis. Mm-hmm. And right now, we have one establishment that's our primary TOT source. I mean, significant portion of it, and what we've found in the past, I don't know how it's been here, but when you deal with the people that are of the sophistication, like the Ojai Valley Inn, generally, they're pretty much in compliance with these things and are right on top of stuff.
Okay.
So, but it's not something that's off the table. It's something that we look at every few years.
Okay. And the Gatsby 45, there was
Yes.
nothing in 13-14. There was 6,000 now in this
Correct.
in the current fiscal year and future. Is that a new compliance audit requirement?
Well, what that is that's directly related to the other post-employment benefits, which is our retiree medical. We're required to have an actuarial valuation done at least every 3 years on that, and this is the year where we're required to have that done. And so we know that there's going to be a cost associated with, so we planned it in. And talking to the actuaries, the way there's been some tweaks to the laws and to the way that they have to calculate this that really makes it more prudent to do it every 2 years rather than every 3.
But we're going to do it 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
You have an adopted budget of 14-15 and a proposed 15-16.
Yeah, it did not happen this year.
Oh, it didn't happen?
No, it did not happen this year. It's going
Budgeted, but it didn't happen.
Well, we're actually,
Okay.
we're starting it, it's one of those things that straddles year end. So it's not going to be double spent, no.
Okay, all right.
I have another question.
Councilmember Clapp.
I'm glad you brought up Gatsby, because I thought with Gatsby, it we're now required to have the unfunded liability as a line item.
The GASB requires that the unfunded liabilities be disclosed in the notes to the financial statements. We have not yet been required to actually record all of the liabilities on the balance sheet of the government, but that is one of those things that will be happening in the coming years. And in our financial statements, you'll remember that we have 2 sections. One is the governmental statements and one is the government-wide statements. That will be something that would show up in the government-wide statements, but not in the actual governmental statements.
So it's about compliance, but maybe for our own benefit, it'd be better to know it ahead of now, so that we can continue maybe budgeting in our yearly budget to continue to fund it.
Oh, absolutely. It's something that we know, and it's in the financial statement, so it's right out there for the whole world to see. Absolutely. It's a good thing we would be better off to go ahead and pre-fund that if we can.
Yeah, we absolutely need to.
The reality of it is that you're always torn between, or which uses are the most important.
Were you pave roads or pre-fund?
Yeah,
I understand.
So.
Great. Any further questions? Nope. Thank you, Rudy.
So the city clerk is next.
Okay, well, my budget is status quo, pretty much. My main function under records management, of course, is the scanning of the documents, and I have approximately, I'd say, 20,000 documents scanned in. I spent the last year and continuing into this budget coming up is I'm starting to scan the maps and plans in the basement. So believe me, it is a lifesaver. Able to quickly get documents now for people. They call in and the city manager calls me and I turn around and 5 seconds later I'm able to get them a document. So I'm very proud of it. The main focus too has been the website. The city council approved a contract in December and we readily jumped on it, and I'm proud to say that it will be up by June 30th. We had our final meeting this morning with the contractor. We'd submitted all our content to them. We've approved the design. There's a team of Steve McClary, Amber, Young, myself, and James Hahn, and so we're really proud of it. We think it'll be a great improvement. Of course, once it goes up, everybody's welcome to look at it and give their comments. There'll be people trained that we can readily change things, and there'll be more content put out there. I'll be able to put most all the resolutions, ordinance, minutes, going back to 1921. So we're happy that people will be able to access a lot more documents than they can now. Let's see, we also put up a constant contact, which constant contact is you can sign up for the agendas. You go to our website, and on the left-hand side, it says sign up for agendas. This actually will save staff time, because before we were manually having to go in, look at the list. Whenever an email bounced back, we'd have to find out why, and then manually remove that, manually update the list as commissions change, city council change, staff change. This way, people sign up. If the email bounces back, the system automatically will drop them out after 1 or 2 times. I'm not really sure how many times, but it takes care of it. People can sign up for all the agendas. They can sign up for just specific agendas. And so we're using that, and that's a low budget item, and it's going to save so much staff time. We're just so excited about that. Like I said, the records, and basically that's it. I'll continue to keep scanning. What I'd like to say is I've actually moved my office from where I was, but in that office I had 3 file cabinets full of files, and I've actually been able to take that down to 1. They're stacking file cabinets of 4, but I had 3 sets, and I'm able to take it down to 1 set just by scanning the documents. A lot of them were old staff reports, which all that's in the system now, and we were able to get rid of it according to our records destruction, our retention schedule. So, any questions? Oh, and one thing I want to mention, sorry, Councilmember Wyrick. Moving forward in the next budgets, we'll be looking at more of the social media aspects, what's out there, Twitter. We do have a Facebook page that I want to compliment Steve McClary on. He set that up, so people search for City of Ojai, our Facebook page, and just look at getting more social media up and running. And as mentioned also by the city manager, is what we can look at that will efficiently help staff to do their jobs as far as social media and the computers. So, any questions?
Councilmember Wyrick?
Just a question about your having to go down to the basement and basically process the archives.
Yes.
Have you given any thought to whether, just from a standpoint of productivity and proper use of your time, whether that's something that a contract service might do more efficiently and productively? I mean, because if you're down in the basement, you're not in your office. Mm-hmm. And you get calls all the time.
I do get calls. Well,
and I just want to ask the question, if you've thought about that.
Well, actually, by scanning the plans, it helps immensely. So, in fact, today I got an email from the Community Development Department, and they were looking for something that was, and they said, is this scanned? And so I said yes, and then I was able to email it to them, and that was able to suffice what they needed to look at. The only reason I need to go down and actually pull the plans now is if someone, like a contractor, comes in, they really need to look at it. But
I'm talking about a specialist company that specifically does archive servicing, archive services. In other words, would be tasked with the job of just going through the records.
Well,
and getting up to date with all the scans, so
Yeah.
you don't, you have them available, but you're not having to manually do the scan yourself.
Oh, I don't manually, I send it out.
Oh, you do send it
I do use
out.
a company, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And
Okay.
so,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
When you said you were down in the basement scanning, I thought you were doing it yourself.
No.
Okay.
Boy, that'd be a nightmare. Where's
You
Martha?
would never see me.
In the basement. Are you never gonna let her out?
Any other question, Councilmember Haney?
I just had one general question for Rob. It seems like we're covering the functions of this building. I don't see any listing for custodial functions. Is that, how is that allocated?
It's in Public Works.
So Public Works, it comes in here on a daily basis, and
The Public Works has a contract, so when we get to the Public Works budget, Mr. Grant can address that for you.
okay, great.
Rhonda, I do have a question in terms of the website. Is there anything budgeted here for the website in your department?
There's actually a fund number. I don't know why it doesn't show up here, but I guess
But
I'd have to get with
you-
Rudy. When I go into Springbrook, though, there is a fund number for website updates, and that's where the,
Will you be updating on the website, or will the team
the
be
team
working
will, there'll be actually
together?
people trained to go in and, because I couldn't do it myself as one person, so we'll be training people to update their own pages. I think there'll be one person designated as the main person, and that's up to the city manager to determine who that person will be. And so, but that person then will be kind of the hound dog and go say, what, I have minutes that are missing, or I have ordinances, and so they'll either ask for that if they have time to do it, or the person trained in that department then will get a reminder and say, oh, do you mind updating this? And of course, the public too will demand that what goes up there, because they'll be calling and asking for things.
Great. Okay, thank you.
So.
Any further questions? No? Thank you. Moving along to the insurance transfer.
Okay, so if we go to page 87, this is the non-departmental department that Mr. Livingston referred to. And so in the top section, we have our various insurances. In the center section, we have community outreach. And that's actually something that we intend to discuss during the public hearing, which I believe is going to be continued now to the 23rd. But there are a number of community organizations that have requested funding this year again, and the council needs to hear those requests and make decisions on it. And then we have transfers to other funds, which in this case are primarily related to our fair share of the street lighting fund and the plaza maintenance fund.
I don't see the Green Coalition in the adopted budget 2014 and 15. Is that because it came out of your department, or?
It was added after the fact, and I don't recall where exactly it's located right now. But yeah, we did enter into a $10,000 contract with the Green Coalition after the budget was adopted last year, and that was added to the budget.
Mr. Mayor, we also, if you look at the community outreach line in there, a lot of those miscellaneous things, we haven't detailed all of the different areas that we have agreed to fund. There's a $75,000 dollar total that we've included in there, and I believe that is part of that number there.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Moving along with the police. Sergeant.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. As in previous years, the budget remains basically the same as it was last fiscal year, especially regarding the line items that we have for office supplies. Those are all funded at the same levels. The personnel costs associated with the one city employee that we have, the dispatcher, Ms. Tina Cook, those rates are set by the city, but the sheriff does reimburse 50% of her salary. So far as I'm sure you see the big difference down under it's titled Ventura County Sheriff's Department. Our business office, they had estimated an increase of about 2.6% for this fiscal year. But the finance director increased it to 7.1, so I was going to let him speak to that and maybe explain the difference in that.
In our discussions over the previous months that we've been here, there's been some comments and questions about the level of service that we're receiving from the sheriff's department, and some possibility that we might want some additional services here. And in anticipation of that, we've actually added a slight amount more to the budget, just in case the council decides that we want to increase that level of service for any of those activities.
So what's the difference between then what we are proposing and what they had interjected? The 2.6 versus 7%? What's the difference? Did I hear right?
I believe it's around 200,000.
Yeah, the total dollars. I don't recall.
2,798, now it's 2,999.
Yeah, but what I understood was that there was going to be an increase of 2.6% to that 27.98, right? And then the city added a different percentage for potential service increases. Do we have that difference?
I can calculate quick.
I can give you a rough calculation here if you give me a minute. We can move
Like
on.
about 150,000.
Yeah, it's something like that, but we can come back and I can get you that number in a
140,000,
moment.
something like that.
Sure.
The difference between the 2 and the 7%.
All right.
Yeah.
270.
Yeah, have a mic on.
And just regarding the level of services, we don't, at this point, we don't have any plans for change. You know, we still have the 2 24-hour patrol cars. We use the post factor of 4.5, which is 9 deputies that, to cover those full-time positions. And then half of the chief of police, city pays for half of the detective, half of the cadet, and we use the COPS funds, the grant, 0.37% of her salary is paid out of the COPS fund. And then the other things that cities pays for is the fuel for the patrol cars, overtime for city cases, or for arrests or incidents that are directly related to the city, and for off-duty court time for just city-related cases.
Great.
So could I wanted to emphasize one thing. He mentioned the 4.5 factor. In order to have one police officer in the field 24/7, you have to have 4.5 police officers on staff to cover 3 shifts and weekends and holidays and all that kind of thing. So that's part of why the number seems so high. You know, we tell people we have 2 police officers on shift and we're paying $3 million. Why is that? That's the reason.
That makes sense. Yeah, Councilmember Clapp?
Do you anticipate a need, have you seen a need for another officer?
I've only been here for a year, so, I mean, there's other things that we could do in the city, you know, with traffic-wise. So our detectives are pretty overloaded, you know, a career enhancement position. Those are all things I think probably the chief would like to speak to versus myself. You know, he has talked about that, but he didn't know if there was going to be the funding available, so he would probably be better to speak on that topic.
I think that would be good
there's some-
to educate us on what is going on in the city and whether or not there appears to be a need. To have it hanging out there but not really have an analysis makes it hard for us to make a decision.
So we can bring that back.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Any other questions? Councilmember Rywick?
Relatively small amount of money, but I noticed special event overtime jumped dramatically from 13-14 to the current fiscal year. Continuing forward, is there any special driver to that? That's the last line above on page 91.
Yeah, I saw that as well. I didn't spend $11,000 in special event overtime last year.
Okay.
So, because I plan them all, I staff them all.
Right.
The event organizers pay for the salary. You know,
Right.
I haven't been shortchanged on anything.
Right.
So, yeah, that's not something.
just wondering.
Yeah, it didn't spend that much last year either.
If I could make a quick comment, I mean, Officer Harwood's comment may be valid, that the organizers pay for it. However, in governmental accounting, we would recognize the revenue and then also recognize the expenditure. So it may be that interplay right there, as opposed to looking at kind of a net number. We would have to be looking at both sides of the equation on that one.
So it's more of cleaning up the accounting practices.
Yeah, I believe, that's what one of my focuses
I
has
got
been
it.
here.
Yeah, sure.
Overhead for you guys.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I had one, Mayor, I
Yeah,
had one question.
Councilmember Haney.
Rob, are on these transfers to other fund, or the transfer to equipment replacement fund, is that just a percentage? Is that why I keep looking at, like, this department has 1 full-time city employee? And so I'm seeing that's a percentage of your 40,000, and
It's based on the number of city employees.
that's what I thought, okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, officer. Moving on to the community development, page 96 to 100.
Good evening. I guess I'm going to say the same thing everyone else has said, that, the budget pretty much stays the same. You look at our overall page here, and you kind of look at all the different duties that we're doing. I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that we're definitely having enhanced our code compliance division. So I'd just like to point out that this proposal for the budget includes 50 hours of contract planner per week and 18 hours of contract clerical per week. I think the other thing that's notable in it is just the training that we're putting in the budget for our commissioners. We have about 7,700 for planning commissioners, and I think equal to that for their historic preservation commissioners too. And the only other thing that I guess that is not in this document that I should bring up is that I've been working with my historic preservation commissioners to have recommendation on budget. And as you know, because of all that transpired in this past year regarding, landmarking and not landmarking, they would, at their last HPC meeting, which was May 28th, they actually requested that I put together a memo for you requesting some additional funds so they could proactively landmark things instead of waiting for the applicants or the actual property owners, to come forward. And so I will be doing that and putting, through the city manager, putting that forward for you via, the HPC. And I think that's all that I have, really, if you have some questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Haney?
Kathleen, is it $7,000 or $14,000? Did you say it was planning commissioners at $7,500 or $7,000 and for training? I was just wondering if we needed to budget more for training. I just have a sense that the planners and even city staff could use additional time in SQL understanding, environmental impacts understanding, and not just planning in your division, but also city council members. We might want to take a class with them or do a joint venture.
Okay, so the planning commission is 7,700, and that's what the HPC, they're both 7,700.
Right.
And the HPC usually goes to their training in July. It's coming up. And then we had a free training that the state gave here in April that also augmented that. But you're right. I mean, I'm sure that they would, look favorably on any opportunity that gave them additional training.
Councilmember Wyrick, did you have a question?
Will we have the actuals for contract services before we get to final budget approval? I know that we allocated additional funding support within the fiscal year. Of course, that's not showing up here in the actuals yet.
Right.
Or in the budget for 14-15. So, I just want to make that comment that the adopted budget actually includes some contract services that are not in this report. And
Right.
it'd be good to have the actuals for comparison to budget for the next fiscal year before.
Yeah, and we can certainly get that for you, Mr. Wyrick. One of the things we, in order to get a budget prepared, we have a cutoff date, and these numbers are generally February of this year. So you're right.
Or we made the budget amendment.
Exactly. So there's changes that haven't happened since then.
Mm-hmm. And I also noticed that the building department has a zeros for, or just dashes for part-time, even going back to actual 13-14, and jumped to 39,000 for the proposed budget 15-16. Just wondered about that. That's a significant change, even going back to the 13-14 fiscal year base.
That's
think
adding in the code
That's the code enforcement officer. So that's okay. So that
He's not
is the code
full-time.
enforcement officer. Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you for that. Clarify exactly what that is. And then the other thing is, I noticed there's allocations for salaries. That's the allocation of salary time, I believe, for your time. The allocations for salaries to the Planning Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, those are allocations of staff time. No, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that I'm curious, the other board that's under the building department, or the building official, is Building Appeals Board, and there's no allocation to that?
Yeah, we have not yet set up a separate budget page for Building Appeals Board.
Okay.
That's something that could be done, but we haven't done it at this point.
I was just asking in terms of consistency of practice.
Yeah.
That's all.
Right, and you will note that I noticed the same thing under Historic Preservation Commission, the salaries aren't there either.
Aren't there for the
No.
future fiscal year?
Well,
Right.
actually, in that case, we did put in money for contract services because our intent was to cover that position with a contract employee rather than a.
Okay. And where is that in the proposed budget?
It's.
Down at the very bottom of that
HPC,
page.
So it's $12,000.
Oh, at the very bottom? Okay.
Yes, where it says $12,000.
Okay, I just think for consistency, I had an issue there with we're doing allocations of both contract services and staff time for those other two, and we're not for Building Appeals Board.
Yeah, as a follow-up to all this, we could develop a separate page for BAB and do the same kind of thing.
And my understanding is that you're attending the meetings for right now?
So,
The-
yeah,
the BAB.
the primary liaison to the Building Appeals Board is the building official. And the Building Appeals Board meets on an as-needed basis, but I've been attending as support for that recently.
Okay.
So your time is valuable.
I don't charge time to those things.
Any other questions?
Okay?
No.
thanks.
I do want to note that we
Sorry.
have less than five.
Oh, no,
wait,
I'm done.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Wool. We do have less than 5 minutes left. I think that if it's okay with the council, instead of getting into another item, it would be appropriate to close this special meeting so we could get the room set up, or, well, we don't really need to get the room set up, but I guess the meeting set up for 7 o'clock, if that's okay with the.
Mr. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to double back on a question that Councilmember Clapp had earlier about the balance in the post-employment benefits. It's about $2 million as of last fiscal year end.
The unfunded liabilities?
That's
of
correct.
2 million?
For the retiree medical, about $2 million.
That's not the overall unfunded liability amount, is it? Because I recall it being 5 million a couple of years ago.
Well, by starting to fund some money on things, and funding stuff ahead of time, it gives us a couple of benefits. One is that when we have it set into a trust like we do right now, we get a lower discount rate on that money, and so that goes into the calculation as well. So I don't know what happened before, but I just looked, while we were sitting here, I looked up the financial statements for last fiscal year, and it was $2 million. We may be thinking of some different numbers here, but you and I can get together with that and talk about that a little bit
Okay.
later. But I
Okay.
just wanted to get back to you on that.
Great, thank you. With that, I'm going to adjourn our special meeting. Thank you.